The morning of April 1st, 1934, began like an ordinary day, one of many that Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow had lived on the road, tired, hungry, armed, and hunted. They had been driving all night, crossing back roads of Texas in their Ford V8, taking turns sleeping lightly with guns across their legs. Their bodies were exhausted beyond anything human, but their instincts were sharper than ever, tuned by months of ambushes, sirens, and bullets. They pulled over near Grapevine to rest for a moment the world would later immortalize without romance, without poetry, without the glamour that once followed them like a shadow. The landscape was quiet, the field still, the sun barely lifting from the horizon. They did not know, as the dew settled on the hood of the car, that the moment would become the first step toward their permanent end, the event that flipped a nation's love into rage and placed a countdown over their heads. Before we continue, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. It helps us create more documentaries like this. Also, the link in the description leads to our Telegram channel where we post rare photos and archival materials YouTube does not allow. Thank you. Now we continue. Henry Methvin and Raymond Hamilton were still with them that morning, both exhausted and paranoid. The gang had been spiraling for months, not because they lost their nerve, but because the world had grown more coordinated in hunting them. Law enforcement, once sloppy and decentralized, now shared information across state lines, radio dispatches were faster, and the country had become more determined to stop being embarrassed by the youthful outlaws who mocked the system. Yet, on the roadside that morning, no guns were drawn. No strategy unfolded. There was no robbery in progress. Just a young couple and two fellow fugitives frozen between desperation and survival as a police motorcycle and patrol car rolled toward them. Officers H.D. Murphy and Edward Wheeler stepped out not as soldiers but as helpers. They thought the car had broken down. They approached with kindness, not aggression. That tragedy, that collision of goodwill and fear, defined the moment. Henry Methvin, according to witnesses, opened fire first, reflexively, not from cruelty but from instinct, and Clyde fired as well. The officers did not stand a chance. They fell in seconds. A third officer, arriving moments later, was also gunned down. The gang sped away, not triumphantly but silently, mechanically, like wolves running from a forest fire rather than toward prey. In that instant, something changed far beyond the edge of that Texas road. The country no longer saw Bonnie and Clyde as rebel lovers fighting a broken system but as murderers who executed young patrolmen on a peaceful morning. The myth cracked. The headlines that followed were not playful. They printed photographs of the slain officers, not the glamorous studio shots of Bonnie with her pistol or Clyde in his fedora. The tone hardened. The public turned. Where crowds once cheered the couple from a distance, they now cursed them. Politicians who once rolled their eyes began to pound fists on tables. Governors promised action. The Texas prison system, humiliated by the Eastern breakout, declared war. And from that moment forward, every gas station, every farmhouse, every stranger on the road became a possible informant. The outlaws were no longer romantic. They were targets. Bonnie and Clyde saw the change immediately. When they read newspapers days later, they understood. They stopped smiling at publicity. They stopped believing they could outrun the world forever. But they did not stop running. They could not stop. The life they built, the choices they made, locked them into a single road with two destinations: escape or death, and they already knew which one awaited them. Yet the Grapevine killings, while turning the country against them, also pushed something else into motion. The gathering of a hunter capable of doing what dozens of officers across 6 states had failed to do. And when that hunter entered the game, the ending became inevitable. Frank Harmer did not care about newspapers, headlines, or personal glory. He was not interested in parades or fame. He was a quiet, methodical predator, a tracker with instincts honed not by procedure but by understanding human nature. When he was hired to pursue Bonnie and Clyde, he did not build a task force. He did not charge into towns waving badges, and he did not chase the gang with sirens and gunfire. He watched, listened, and learned. He read their movements the way a hunter reads the tracks of an animal, not in the direction they ran, but in the direction they would always return. Every criminal has a pattern, no matter how wild, and he believed the Barrow gang would prove no exception. He traced their robberies, their family visits, their supply stops, their geographic comfort zones. He realized something most lawmen never did. Bonnie and Clyde did not run randomly. They circled. They looped through Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, and Louisiana like ghosts locked in orbit around the few people they trusted and the few places where they felt human. Harmer shadowed them silently for weeks, avoiding confrontation. His goal was not to arrest, it was to end the chase forever, by any means necessary. He followed their habits, not their crimes. He learned exactly how long they lingered in safe houses, how many miles they traveled between gas stops, how much ammunition they carried, and how desperate they had become. He knew that fatigue was weakening them more than bullets ever could, and when people are tired enough, they make mistakes. Meanwhile, inside the gang, fractures were widening. Raymond Hamilton drifted away after disagreements over money and leadership. Tensions constantly simmered between hunger, fear, and the claustrophobia of survival. Clyde's driving had become reckless paranoia kept him awake for days at a time. His hearing in one ear was damaged by gunfire, and he flinched at sudden sounds. Bonnie was in constant pain from burns she suffered in an earlier car crash. Clyde often had to carry her because she could barely walk. They were no longer the energetic rebels who posed for camera lenses and laughed in getaway cars. Their world had shrunk to a moving coffin on wheels. The Ford V8 became their bedroom, their fortress, their prison. They robbed gas stations not to get rich, but to eat and drive another 200 miles before sunrise. They no longer searched for treasure, they searched for hours of safety. When they slept in wooded ditches or abandoned barns, they positioned weapons around them like walls. They whispered to one another to avoid being overheard by the wind. They listened to dogs barking in the night and didn't know whether the threat was nearby or imagined. But through it all, one truth remained. They would never surrender. Clyde had sworn to his mother that he would never again see the inside of a cell. Bonnie, asked once whether she would give up for a normal life, replied that she would rather die next to Clyde than live without him. Those were not slogans. They were decisions. And decisions have consequences. The Texas authorities eventually realized that to stop Bonnie and Clyde, they needed loyalty from someone inside the circle, and that loyalty came from Henry Methvin's family. In Bienville Parish, Louisiana, where the Methvins lived, Harmer began laying the groundwork for the final trap. Ivy Methvin, Henry's father, became the reluctant key. Whether through negotiation, persuasion, or pressure, no one will ever fully know, but the arrangement was clear. If Ivy assisted in catching Bonnie and Clyde, his son Henry might avoid execution. If he didn't, the rope awaited. The entire fate of the world's most famous outlaw couple suddenly depended not on police, not on bullets, not on skill or strategy, but on whether a tired, frightened father would betray the two people who protected his son on the road. When Ivy agreed, the countdown accelerated. The plan was merciless and simple. Officers would wait near a logging road where Bonnie and Clyde sometimes came to meet Henry. No warnings would be issued. No arrests attempted. No negotiations. When the Ford V8 appeared, they would not be given the chance to lift their guns or speak their names. The trap was built on the understanding that surrender was impossible. Bonnie and Clyde had become symbols of defiance, and symbols are never allowed to live once the government decides they are too powerful. On the morning of May 23, 1934, the air in Bienville Parish was warm and thick with humidity. Dew clung to pine branches, and the red dirt road twisted through the woods like a vein. The ambush team, Frank Harmer, Ted Hinton, Bob Alcorn, Prentice Oakley, Henderson Jordan, and others, had been waiting for hours hidden behind bushes and tree stumps. They were armed with Browning automatic rifles, shotguns, and pistols, positioned with a single unified purpose: end Bonnie and Clyde immediately. The tension was not heroic or triumphant, it was grim. Some of the men admired Bonnie and Clyde privately, some despised them, but none intended to leave room for hesitation. The world had shifted since Grapevine, and failure was no longer an option. Around 9 o'clock, dust rose from the end of the road. The hum of an engine approached. The Ford V8 came into view. Bonnie sat beside Clyde holding a sandwich. They were not smiling, not celebrating, not planning a robbery, just talking like two exhausted travelers in love, unaware of what waited behind the bushes. Clyde slowed the car slightly, recognizing a truck ahead. That microsecond of recognition was all the ambush team needed. According to most accounts, Sheriff Jordan gave a verbal signal, but whether Clyde heard anything will never be known. Some say he looked up. Some say he didn't. Some claim Bonnie screamed. Others say the hail of bullets drowned any human sound. What is certain is that no surrender was demanded. No warning shots were fired. No commands were issued. The gunfire began so intensely and so fast that the echo blurred into a single roar. Glass shattered instantly. Metal tore like paper. Dust lifted from the ground as bullets punched through the ford from every direction. Clyde died early in the barrage, likely from the first burst of rifle fire piercing his head. Bonnie died moments later, her body torn apart before she had a chance to move. The shooting continued long after both were gone, not from cruelty, but from certainty. Officers had seen them survive ambushes before hesitation meant death. When the final shot echoed into silence, the legendary outlaw couple that once seemed unstoppable lay slumped in the front seat of a ruined car, surrounded not by applause, not by music, not by the glamour of flashbulbs, but by pine needles, dust, and the thick smell of gunpowder. What followed was both chaotic and symbolic. Word traveled faster than the law could control it. Within minutes, civilians arrived. Farmers, drivers, people eager not to arrest or judge, but simply to see. Some tried to cut locks of Bonnie's hair or tear fabric from her clothes as souvenirs. One man attempted to slice off Clyde's trigger finger. Officers pushed people back, forming a perimeter to protect the bodies not out of respect, but out of necessity. The couple who once inspired the nation to dream of rebellion now inspired the mob to take whatever pieces of them they could. Their bodies were transported to funeral homes where thousands of people waited to get a glimpse. Women fainted. Men climbed walls. Everyone wanted proof that the two figures who lived beyond law and fear were finally still. Yet death did not simplify their legacy. 4 decades afterward, arguments raged. Were they criminals shaped by a broken era or monsters built from their own choices? Were they a love story destroyed by poverty or two killers who turned desperation into an excuse? The truth lies somewhere between, in the fact that Bonnie and Clyde were not born villains and did not wake up one morning deciding to become legends. They were two young people who fell in love and discovered, too late, that the road they chose offered no exits. Crime gave them freedom and buried them. Violence kept them alive and destroyed them. Passion fueled their courage and guaranteed their downfall. And when the Grapevine murders turned the country against them, nothing, not escape, not loyalty, not devotion, could change the final destination. In the end, it does not matter that Bonnie wrote poems or that Clyde loved music. It does not matter that they gave money to poor families sometimes or that they were kind to the people who fed them. It does not matter how many movies soften them or how many songs romanticize their story. Because the photographs of that Ford V8 filled with bullet holes, their bodies slumped together in silence, speak louder than any myth. Rebellion has a cost, and no legend survives without a grave. Bonnie and Clyde lived fast enough to be remembered forever, and died fast enough to never grow old. Their story did not fade with time. It became a warning whispered across decades. Love can be powerful enough to follow someone anywhere, even into hell, and once you step onto a road built on bullets, the only ending waiting at the other side is the roadblock you cannot break through.